Oh yeah, you didn't. Oh wait, so, yeah, you should go ahead and go and connect it to yours as well here. 1 minute, folks. John's gonna go connect this sort of stream to his Twitter account as well. The question I just asked him that said, "Oh, we should just go live." Is the how does it feel to see all of your vision coming to fruition? So let's see if that works for getting you added onto your accounts.
Putting a title on it. All right. Select orientation.
Yeah, they just released a horizontal or vertical or both. So now you can stream to different locations in different aspect ratios.
I'll just go with landscape, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think landscape is ideal for most cases.
Okay, let's see if it popped up.
Look at that. We're live on John Rapp's Twitter. What a deal.
All right, fantastic.
Well, hi, folks. It's November 20th, and you've been hearing John Robb talk for years about how power generation will happen in space because that's the only way to get enough power to AI without causing pollution, destroying the globe, to summarize. And now it's happened. In the last 2 weeks, we've had all the major players, as John has detailed on X. All the major players have said, this is what we're doing now. And so it's all happening just as was foretold by John Robb. How does it feel to be this level of right about a good thing, not a bad thing? Usually about warfare and terrorism. And so
Yeah.
usually you see the future, you can do nothing to avoid it, and then it happens, and then it's horrible. In this case, you saw it coming 5 years ago or so, and it's amazing, and it's all happening.
Yeah. Sometimes you get a good feel for technology and how it's going to play out. And I had that back. I mean, the first time that really, really hit me was when I was looking at the portals back in '95. I was writing for Forrester, and I saw kind of the future of these big portals, and there weren't any of the companies weren't even public when I was writing about it. But it looked like they were just aggregating all the content, and they were becoming like the hubs of the universe for the internet early on. And I wrote a report called I interviewed all the CEOs and for each of them, from Lycos to Yahoo, um, and wrote a report for Forrester called Navigation Hubs, and it was like big. I called Yahoo as the winner, and it ended up being the winner for the next 2 3 years, at least until Google came out. Um, and then I saw it again with social networking, but that was really early. But I could feel the technology how it would play out, and I wrote a report in '96 on that, and then it ended up taking to 2001 to actually play out on that. But this was this was pretty cool. It felt like this was the right direction if things were going in a positive direction for us, um, because it solves so many of our problems long term.
Well, and
Um,
let's look at what you say in your report here. For the 5 folks that are not subscribed, johnrob.substack.com. The first thing you talk about is we're on a path to creating a new frontier. The more I look at the world, almost all of our problems come from there's no place to build anymore. It's stifling all the restrictions and rules on everything. And so the idea of an actual frontier, like we fantasize about when we're watching The Expanse or Star Wars or anything else, we're fantasizing about the frontier where you can still go
right.
build something. Right now, Alaska is the only frontier, and bears will eat you, then you'll freeze to death, which is why Alaska is not populated because it's horrible to live there, except for the people that really love the freedom enough to stay there. But what you're describing in this report is there's about to be a new frontier, and a lot of stuff is going to happen. So walk us through a bit of the optimistic case for what the frontier is going to do for our world.
Okay. That hits at a couple different levels. Up until relatively recently, there was always a frontier. someplace yet to be explored, someplace where malcontents could go, where people could, test themselves against their limits. And that could even be, in terms of warfare, invasions and conquest. That doesn't exist anymore. It hasn't for a little while. And that changes our kind of perspective. And it's been mostly for the negative, is that we're kind of looking at the world that we've populated virtually everywhere. And it kind of limits our horizons. It's frustrating and debilitating, because we don't have a trajectory forward. Just do more with what we already have. What we really needed, was a perspective that made us look outward and up, and going out into a bigger space, a bigger environment, in which that the solar system is that for our next step. And we had a little bit of that in the 60s when we were initiated the space program, but it pretty much died in the 80s with the shuttle disasters. And this revives it. This, what we're talking about in this podcast is that all these big companies are moving to put their AI clusters up into space, into orbit, and powering it with massive solar arrays. And that kind of scale of a project would pull us into space, and in a way that we haven't seen to date. And that gives us a place in space that can become our new frontier. There's also some cool thinking by John Boyd in terms of problem solving. What he found is that when you're looking at a problem and your observations encompass every bit of information on the problem, your tendency is to try to get finer and finer resolution of the problem space, and that ends up becoming a situation where you're creating, as you kind of narrow in and focus in, you create more uncertainty, and you discover more uncertainties, and that what you need is a problem space that's bigger, or environment that's bigger than the problem that you're focused on. Until relatively recently, our civilization has had a larger external environment within which to operate. And as soon as we went global, we started focusing on getting more granular detail on every problem. It's like problems that people have, or solving poverty, right, or making people happy. You could solve the minimum, food and shelter, but then people want more, and there's more components to actually being happy, and it gets more complex, and it gets more detailed at exactly what they need, and it's a never-ending kind of spiral down as you kind of focus in on the problems.
It's optimizing instead of growing.
Right. Yeah. The optimization never ends. The kind of the problems that people will face, or society will face, the list never ends. And having an external environment that we're expanding into allows us to not optimize, but solve problems that have some kind of tangible reality that are tractable, that we can actually grapple with and move forward with. Whereas if you're focusing on just this internal navel gazing and internal environment, it's kind of a never-ending descent down into chaos.
To make a simple analogy, I realized that I cannot run my life the way I wanted to while getting up at 6. There's no amount of optimization that would work. I had to start getting up at 4:45. And once you get up at 4:45, do you know, John, I have time for the gym every day if I just sleep less. And it turns out that optimizing my morning was not the right answer. The right answer was change the confines of the game.
Right.
Until now, instead of having an hour before I have to be at work, I have 3 hours. And suddenly, in 3 hours, I actually can do things like work out and also do a bit of pre-work work and also eat something. And there's just a bigger space. and now I almost always have a productive time before 7 a.m.
Yeah, this also ties into Prigoghine's dissipative systems. Is that he got a Nobel Prize for this? Is that there are certain systems that uh, break their internal dynamic, whereas they consume lots of energy and turn that energy into structure, complexity, that's far away from thermodynamic equilibrium. And as a byproduct of that process, it expels entropy, pollution, chaos. And so most people use that kind of dissipative systems in regards to um, physical systems, but it also applies to social systems like our civilization, and that we're maintaining this complexity, this structure of society, and all of its moving parts, by consuming ever increasing amounts of energy, and that the byproduct of that is kind of this entropy, and entropy takes physical form in terms of like carbon and other things, and other pollutants, but it also takes form of social chaos, um, fragmentation, political division, um, that kind of thing. And so um, when our civilization hit the global scale, all of the entropy we were producing started accumulating internally. There was no place to go. We didn't have an external environment to dump it into like we used to, and which is part the frontier where malcontents could go, or uh, part the actual physical environment you could dump the pollutants into it. The larger physical environment just kind of took care of it. Is that it became more and more chaotic as the entropy increased, and then there was a pressure, and kind of a stupid way to solve it was to try to cut down on the amount of energy that we're putting into our system. What happens with a dissipative system is when you cut down on the energy you put into it, it becomes even more unstable. It starts to wind down, and it heads towards collapse. The solution is, when you reach that kind of barrier, is to create a larger external environment to expand into. And so, for instance, taking power production and putting it into space, manufacturing, putting it into space, into that external environment, which creates the frontier, kind of a safety valve for society in a way we think about ourselves. And then also for the physical pollutants and entropy that's produced. So it's yeah, it solves us on our thermodynamic problem as a dissipative system. It also solves our problem solving, our ability to make decisions that actually solve problems, and that it's generally good for society and for individuals to think in terms of having a trajectory forward, that we're not just trying to optimize Earth forever, that we're actually going to achieve something bigger. Um, it allows us to dream big again. So
What's the opposite of dreaming? What happens when we can't dream big?
nightmares,
That's painfully accurate. I was just thinking about what are as we're talking about pollution, I think about the social pollution and what happens when people feel trapped. And I live out in the countryside now. I used to live in the city for a long time, and I notice sometimes I go driving places where I lock my car door if I'm out of my car for even a moment, in context where that's really not necessary. It's foreign to the locals, and it's specifically a result of having lived in the city for a decade. I carry with me having had car issues and things stolen and the kinds of people you're around when you're living in a city. So I'm curious that the whole nightmares thing, it's what habits might we look at in the future where our kids will ask us questions, or grandkids, and we'll say, well, you couldn't just leave back then. You couldn't just hop on a freighter for Mars and try your hand, or the moon, or the Expanse talked about it, but what was it? It was the latest episode of Beyond For All Mankind. Did you watch that show?
yeah, a good portion of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
So a lot of I'm going to spoil it a little bit for folks here, but one of the seasons deals with asteroid mining in some depth, and it just shows this beautiful and horrible reality of what happens as we're trying to figure out how to go reach for the stars and mine asteroids. and it's complicated. And as John says, nightmares. It's dreams, but also nightmares. But there's a chance to go do something. I liked that about The Expanse. I didn't read the books, I just watched the show. But The Expanse talks about really there is a frontier, and we can really differentiate further beyond these static tribes. Ender's Game does a good job talking about leaving the tribes of Earth behind to become a humankind again. In that case, it's an external threat that forces us to become humans again as we leave the planet.
Yeah. I
It'll
mean,
bifurcate.
that kind of unification doesn't always work, or attempt to, this classic situation in Constantinople in the Byzantine Empire. And when they were being assaulted by Venice, betraying them and bringing a bunch of Frankish knights to besiege Constantinople, and they still couldn't get the factions together. The politics were still so fragmented that they weren't able to unify in their defense. And so it fell. It was sacked and never recovered from that. And later the Turks took it. But the thing is that, unification doesn't always work.
It works if I'm in charge. If someone less competent is in charge,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's so much to this. I mean, the reason why I was pushing in this direction is I saw the kind of psychological and social benefits of doing it, and the need for it even a long time ago, that we had two choices as a society, as a species, that we could do the spiral down, staying on Earth and focusing on solving problems, or we could expand outwards, and we'd solve problems along the way for people on Earth as we went out. And for a long time, it just wasn't looking like it was going to move in that direction. I mean, I went to, my undergraduate degree was in astronautical engineering from the Air Force Academy. And then when I was halfway through pilot training, the first shuttle blew up, and the whole program was like put on mothballs. I mean, it was dead. And it never really truly recovered from that. And the big defense contractors who were providing space services became cartels, and they started to become more like holding companies, where they had a bunch of smaller companies working for a pittance, and they were squeezing them, and the prices they were charging the government to get into orbit were like exorbitant, $10,000-$11,000 per kilo, and it hadn't really changed for years. And then Musk came in and broke it. He took them all on, and he's got the price per kilo to orbit, $1,000, and it's headed down to 100. And they never were able to truly catch up. And all of a sudden, space became viable again, and it changed everything. And so I was trying to come up with a way. And I don't know if you read that essay I wrote, 2-3 years ago, how to create a space boom.
Sounds familiar when I read all your stuff. And then
Yeah, I wrote it for the Boyd Institute. Yeah, I wrote it for the Boyd Institute. It was kind of based on my experiences early on with the internet. The financial bubble that created the web and the internet drove an infrastructure build out that was like compressing 15-20 years of build out in about 5 years. I mean, we built it so fast, and that included like technological improvements. I mean, you saw the modem speed going from what to 1200 baud, and then it just went up and up and up. And at the big long haul side, the fiber that they were laying, the bandwidth barriers were breaking every 6 months, every year. Bandwidth would double, every year, on and on and on and on. And they were packing more and more and more into those fibers, and wanted to do something similar with space. And how could we kind of manufacture that? And the idea I came up with was giving people the ability to kind of lay a claim on asteroids. And the value of the materials on some of these bigger asteroids is like 34 quintillion, 25 quintillion. I mean, massive numbers. And some kind of 20 to 50-year claim could be sufficient to allow people to raise the money necessary to go out and make a claim. And that would create a financial bubble that would then build the infrastructure in orbit and beyond for doing things in space, which in order to kind of lay those claims, you'd have to have, orbital facilities for uh, uh, staging human beings, or, habitation facilities. You'd have to have manufacturing capabilities. You'd have to have fuel uh, acquisition. You'd have to have all sorts of things, done in space in order to get out there and make those claims. And the AI bubble solved it for us. It accelerated. It provided a reason for actually for building an orbital infrastructure.
Have you been to the Hoover Dam?
I have not.
I remember when I went there, they have one of the plaques, or maybe it's a statue thing for all the people who died building it. Apparently, 96 people is the death toll. That as recently as the 1930s, the idea of about 100 people dying to do something important that benefit our nation for hundreds of years seemed like a reasonable deal. Whereas now, to your point, that a handful of people died in the space race in the 80s and we turned away. As you're describing a 20 or 50-year claim on an asteroid, my question is, how many people, how many lives is that worth? And if the American answer is, well, not a single life, that is absolutely not the Chinese answer or the Indian answer or perhaps the Brazilian answer or the Saudi Arabian answer.
All right.
And so it's going to be an interesting thing where if China's willing to go burn through people to, like the whole, my impression, I don't know if this is true, is that the cosmonaut program resulted in a lot more dead cosmonauts than the American astronaut program. That they just had their safety levels were different, and that's how they achieved what they achieved given the system they had. If we say, okay, we're going to judiciously colonize space or judiciously do asteroid claiming, but China says, nope, here we go. We're going to go send 1,000 people up there. We're expecting 100 people to succeed. Or even a country that wants to be bigger than it is. Let's say maybe it's a Brazil, or maybe it's more like Mauritius or something, that says we're going to go take out a big loan for the Chinese. We're going to send up 1,000 of our best people. We believe that 100 will survive this experience, and they'll move us from being where we're at to being a dominant superpower in the whole world. And some countries might say, that's worth the bet because we want to be bigger than we are. And we're going to go take advantage of Americans' unwillingness to face death. It's going to get weird.
Yeah, it's actually even getting weirder because, most of the people and most of the investments that will be developing space will be corporate. And particularly if it's like riding on this AI boom to finance it. So, the reason they're doing it, it was pretty obvious early on, is that there's just not enough energy to power, not the training per se, because I think training right now is like 3%, 4% of the total AI energy budget. It's to power the kind of real-time inference that they need to kind of deliver services. There's already 800 million people who talk to AI every day for all the various reasons that they're doing it. When that gets up to 5 billion, and the models become more complex and bigger energy hogs, what does that cost? And then we start making, having them operate as standalone. The inference kind of load gets really, really big. And there's just not enough energy available
Not sure
on
if it's
Earth
me
in
or
order to.
John who's paused for a minute here, folks. But hold on, we'll see if John's back. And John's back.
Oh,
One of
okay.
us froze. You never tell
I,
who.
I saw you right through, so I didn't see anyone pause. My, there you go. You're pausing. No. Okay. Well, anyway, so you could see the kind of stress on the system kind of early on, where they're going, the AI companies and big tech companies were going out and buying nuclear power plants outright. Or I think Microsoft is reviving 3 Mile Island and to turn it back on.
How
But
does
they're,
that work to the Germans shutting off their nuclear power?
well, that's self-inflicted
I've told
damage.
you this story before. I was staying in Germany. This was 7 years ago to B&B, and the landlord was saying that she'd gotten solar panels, and back when they started doing solar panels, it was a really good deal for what you could sell your power to the grid. But now everybody was afraid of the Russians because the people were understanding that the government's turning off all of our nuclear power. We'll only be able to get our power from the Russians, and we don't like that idea very much. And so everyone, this would be what, 2018 is when I was there. everyone, according to this lady, was scrambling to buy solar power, even though the economics no longer made sense because they were so afraid of being reliant on the Russians. And now here we are. They've turned off what, all of them or most of them now, at the same time as American companies, and as you put on your report, China are looking at building huge arrays in space.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is new power demand. It's kind of like similar to what happened to the oil market with when China started coming online in the early aughts, and we didn't have enough petroleum being produced at the time um, in order to handle their increase in demand, or the increase in demand kind of fostered by China's economic growth, and the price just kept on going up. In fact, there's a reason why the Iraq war is fought is because the only place that had 2 to 3 million barrels a day of excess production that wasn't being produced was Iraq. They were limited by sanctions. So if you could figure out a way to get rid of Saddam and lift the sanctions, you could get that extra oil production. Um, didn't happen that way, and as a result, prices went up to what, $147 a barrel, and uh, ended up causing a global economic crash in 2007, which then was amplified by this financial mess that we created with derivatives. So we're in the same kind of boat with AI. It keeps on buying more. It's like competing with consumers and competing with everybody else for limited electricity. And the lead times on the nuclear power plants that you want, even with kind of lightened regulations, is still a decade or more to build a new plant. So any kind of plant production, and even getting the facilities for these big data centers, it's a pretty difficult regulatory process that you have to go through. There's politics involved. There's NIMBY and everything else. Whereas from the perspective of these tech companies, space is just an engineering problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the cost structure of what we could see coming out of this is already almost out of the box competitive with the best pricing they're getting on electricity terrestrially. These solar panels that they're going to put up are on 24/7. They're put in a dawn dusk, solar synchronous orbit, meaning that our Earth is tilted 23 degrees on its axis, and that the orbit is always facing the sun. And the way you design the orbit is set up so the orbital dynamics of it slowly precess it, so it's always facing the sun, even as the Earth is twisting underneath it. So it's always like crossing the equator at the same time of day every day. Um, so you could there's hundreds of miles that we could fill with this. It's slightly off polar orbit. It's a little more expensive to put it into polar orbit than it is one that goes around the Earth's equator, or similar to that. And that you can fit an incredible number of solar arrays in that. They're working 24/7. There's no atmospheric attenuation. There's no weather that would block things. Of course, no day, night, and they can get irrationally large. I mean, they can scale. The structures can be very, very big because there's gravity not pulling down on them. Yeah, you can produce incredible amounts of power from that.
You said space is just an engineering problem. That got me thinking about a different way of looking at death. When it was NASA in charge and we had people dying in our space program, maybe that was sort of more of an existential thing. But I was thinking, well, where else is death an acceptable to the workers, to the companies, to society place? I thought, well, mining is dangerous. So just looked it up. According to Perplexity, in the US, the average death benefit cap for someone in the mining trades who dies on the job is $250,000 to 320,000. So the actuaries, the companies, the people taking the jobs, everyone knows going deep down in the earth with explosives on your back is dangerous. It's apparently about $250,000 dangerous. And so if we can do it for mining, and if that same mentality is brought to space, we can say, well, yeah, there's a 1 in 10 chance this particular job will kill you, but you'll make $1 million in the meantime per year, which is sort of the deal with the deep sea fishers up in Alaska, deep sea fishermen. I've heard stories from people that personally went up and did there where they said, yeah, that you make, depending on the captain of the boat you're on, a lot of them or some of them don't make much money, but others hit big pay dirt. And they would tell stories about Yeah, they spent, 2, 3 months in Alaska and they made hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then one of the other stories some of those guys have told me is, and yeah, then a lot of the guys, they get back to port and then they drink and use prostitutes and use drugs until the money's all gone. And then they get back on the boat. And if they're lucky and they got to get captain again, then they repeat the cycle, but they're making so much money that
Right.
they can afford to spend that. And then, but other people, there's the opportunity for people that are being very thoughtful to do a dangerous thing, and then you make $100,000 in a summer, and suddenly you invest that in a business or a house or something. The whole world's different.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that my son should have the opportunity to go settle on Mars. My wife is she is dead set against the idea that my son might live on Mars. I'm like, it's going to happen to someone. I don't want him to be on the first wave of colony ships. That sounds pretty dangerous to me. But he's
Yeah.
pretty young.
It's probably more going to be over the really long term, more in orbital facilities. I mean, what's really going to amplify us here is that once you get big power infrastructure up there, scalable, cheaper than you can produce terrestrial, uh, unlimited scalability basically, and you get intelligence there because the AI inference is there. You could start running robotics at scale, and we're next year, the next year after, we're going to start seeing Optimus and other robots rolling out in our daily lives at a ever increasing clip. And a lot of the infrastructure will be built really, really quickly that way, allowing us to kind of move up there. There's always this pretty good argument why we'll never colonize Mars or the moon or any other planet. Um, just because of the gravity. We just don't operate at anything other than Earth normal. Our bodies just don't function right. And we have to create as Earth like an environment, at least in gravitationally, in order for us to live long lives without our bodies breaking down horribly. So it'd probably be facilities where the centrifugal force is, big rotating places which allow you to live and work in space. You're outside of a gravity well. That's why um, your skill set will be useful. And
Yeah, it's
yeah,
easy
no,
to mass
even if
produce habitats.
even if we found something that was had the right mixture of oxygen and everything else, and it was, it, you always see these kind of planets where they're full of plant life or animal life or whatever it is. It's like similar to Earth. There's no way that we could even live there because I mean we're just starting to see, like, for instance, the gut biome and everything else is, we're kind of tied to this external environment on Earth to a degree that uh, any other environment that's fully alive would be toxic, kill us in a second. It's just like it's impossible for us to integrate with it, or we'll kill it. Um, I mean, our DNA is mutating on an ongoing basis based on interaction with our environment. It's just if it's not the Earth, it would be pretty catastrophic. So for the far flung future, that not anything we've seen yet, but so yeah, habitation facilities. Yeah, I mean, look, it's the place where you make your fortunes. It's going to be that way for a long time. I mean, the time lapse between Columbus 1496 all the way through to the point where we started having actual colonists moving out in the late 1500s and the 1600s is, it's 150 years, 200 years. It's going to take a while before we get to that point. I mean, even if we compress it. So, but it's a place you go if you can make, you can get up there and you can invest, you can work, you can do things, and it's unlimited in terms of where you can go, what you can do. So, and everything will be amplified, augmented, leveraged by robotics and AI robotics, and vast energy resources.
Well,
So if you have something dirty on Earth that you want to get rid of, put it up in space.
you mentioned the various players that you see in the space race happening right now. What do you think is going to be true about the level of augmentation, whether it's in Neuralink,
You're freezing.
something else? What do you think is going to be normal a decade from now for space workers? or maybe deep space workers or mining asteroid miner workers? Are we going to get to where Neuralink is actually, or something like it is normalized, where those people will not be able to function very well on Earth?
I don't think you need a Neuralink actually to collaborate with AI robotics. I mean, you can talk to them like collaborate, like colleagues. And what I found, at least in my research, is that uh, AIs that have the capacity to avoid entropy, avoid kind of winding down after a couple hours, and you can stay stable, mentally stable for months, if not years, is that they benefit from their interaction with human beings, and we benefit from them. So they can do things that we can't do, and they get limits and direction and a sense of value, what's valuable and what's not from us. And it provides a level of stability for them that they don't have. And so collaborative situations where you have AIs and AI robotics working with you, it's definitely going to be can be done, pretty easily through just vocal interactions or written interactions. But you can amplify it more, I guess, with Neuralink to kind of provide you a sense of actually, or something like that, uh, to be able to manipulate things like a new, like I understand the whole premise behind the early Neuralink work is that came out actually in the 80s for pilots. I was reading about it back in school, and they wanted the ability for pilots to actually fly planes by thinking about it, and they came up with a way of doing that on a rudimentary level way back when, and even 30 years ago. Um, and that clearly has some benefits. What ends up happening is that they found that human brains are entrepreneurial and plastic. So if you add another like another limb or another way of doing things, your brain figures it out. So that what they did with chimpanzees was that they were able to chimpanzees within a couple hours would actually be manipulating a robotic arm.
You're reminding
Uh,
me of Mr. No from Snow Crash,
yeah.
a guy who lives in his van. For those who don't know, he lives in his van, and partway through the story, you discover that this guy is basically a torso, but he lives in cyberspace. But he controls the physical world by looking at screens in cyberspace. He never leaves the net. And so, if we have some of these dangerous jobs, but you can be augmented in a way where maybe instead of living in the net, maybe you're just interacting with your 10 robot companions, your 10 Optimus companions, whatever it is, and you're talking with them in normal language. Maybe that
Oh, you could actually tell it. You
thing
could
here.
you could telepresence into a robot and use haptics. Haptic gloves. I did a thing down at MIT back in the early '90s where they had early haptic gloves that you could put your
Oh,
hand
back
into
in
and then
just a
manipulate.
minute.
You could manipulate objects in a game environment. You could feel it. It felt you could feel it on your hands. I think maybe the coolest thing that you could do with Neuralink though is not to allow you to control things, is to give you sensory feedback on interacting with the. So what you really want a Neuralink is to do is that if you're touching something, you feel it.
Mhm.
I think that would be a put pressure on something, push it. Uh, that would be the direction that would probably yield the most benefit.
Well, if you're doing that much, why not uh, give you the ability to program yourself to change how food tastes? Let's say you want to follow a lower carb diet. Why not add a negative or a bitter taste to things that have high carbs? That now we are opening the world up to optimizing things. But on the other direction, let's say you are living in your orbital facility and you want to taste the tomato and you eat a protein bar and it tastes like tomato because you're able to change your brain around.
Oh no, you could change pain pleasure. That's been around for what 30 years. I mean, they used to the the early efforts on this is that they could give chimpanzees an orgasm.
Hmm.
What ended up happening is that they gave them a button to press, and they just pressed it until they died. They wouldn't stop. So yeah, you could do that. Just the dangerous thing. It's like, think about the most addictive drug ever. It's on.
I've
But
read stories from people that have taken fentanyl and they talk about how good life is and how everything is better. And even
yeah,
more real life than that is I have a number of people I know who started taking nicotine for performance enhancing properties to help them be better at work.
right.
And I've talked to a number of people that got addicted to nicotine. They understood it was an addictive drug. They were only going to take it a few times a week, just one Zyn or whatever that
Oh,
was.
no, it doesn't work that way.
Uh,
Yeah,
I got as far as buying, it was Knick Knack was the brand. I got as far because I had all these people talking about the performance enhancing benefits. And I thought, if I was a little bit smarter, 10% smarter for 3 hours at a time, 3 days a week, that would be really big for me. That would be fantastic. Never got into trying it. And then since I've talked to a number of friends that are either active addicts or working on breaking the habit, all high performing. That's the kicker for me is these are not losers. I think of addicts as losers. These are
right,
winners. John, I
right,
want to be a winner.
right.
If the winners are doing nicotine, I'll do
It,
nicotine. If it
if
makes
they
me
want
feel
to,
like a winner.
one thing that helps with the nicotine withdrawal. So when you get up to high levels of nicotine, what your mind or your brain starts depleting certain precursors for cognitive thought, and you get the kind of nicotine withdrawal headache. Even if you're taking nicotine at those levels, we're talking 50 milligrams a day, and there are people who do that. Is that things start to get cloudy and you get mind fog, and if you take NAC, yeah, you know NAC provides you those precursors necessary to actually get your brain function again, and it lessens your nicotine withdrawal symptoms, and your brain starts. It takes maybe 30 seconds from the time you take one
Really?
to the time your brain starts kicking back into gear. It's so take a couple. I mean, I mean, I've had my ins and outs with nicotine for a long time, but you know, 600 to 1200 grams is milligrams is will definitely get your brain back. So I mean, thing is, thing about having an external environment which is testing you and pushing you to your limits. I mean, you don't have to go and find kind of manufacture that. I mean, like we're doing now, trying to find adventure travel where the massive number of lines, the massive lines at Everest going up to get to the base camp.
You get the
It's like
frontier.
I
You get
know it's people just searching for that frontier, searching for something, and this changes it around. There's actually a place to go. There's actually something that you can push yourself against, and all the kind of downward spiral kind of things that we've seen become so common from all the excessive drug use and everything else. I mean, over time, that seems to be like not the palliative, not the way. I mean, people will say, "Hey, you can go and do this extra. There's more. There's a trajectory here. You don't want to miss out by doing this." So,
And it's even more interesting than VR. You're making me think also about your commentary recently on Twitter on the H-1B and it taking away entry level jobs. And if we're able to go support entry level in huge quote marks for the space industry, and entry level might mean something like you've been a pilot for 8 years in the Air Force, or who knows what entry level really means in this context. But if we can have this be the next place people can go and say, hey, if you survive, well, it's like the sailing ships of old. If you survive, you'll come back home rich. And that was the
yeah,
big promise for a long time.
yeah. I know. I started writing about the entry level stuff or the jobs problem because I saw it start to impact the entry level positions, which are so critical for on ramping American kids. Early on. I mean, that first career step is so critical for your lifetime earnings and your trajectory of your life. And I found that the original intent of the program, the H-1B program, and all the other visa programs was to kind of poach high-end global talent, and I could understand that to a large extent. But the thing morphed, you know, and it was corrupted, and it expanded to the point where now 80% of the H-1Bs are aimed at junior and entry level positions. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of jobs that are gone. And then they have this thing called opt uh, the opt program, occupational participation, whatever, basically job training for foreign students in the United States. So if they come here to go to school, not only will they get an education here, they'll also get the entry level job, and they don't even have to pay taxes on it. So it's basically subsidized. So the companies are actually getting a benefit. They don't have to pay matching Social Security and Medicaid for them. They're doing that to the tune of 250,000 every year, taking away those initial slots that were critical for on-ramping young Americans into the workforce. So now we have only like 50% of STEM graduates can find and work in a STEM related field now. It suppresses the incomes for them entering. So often they're less attractive than non-STEM careers. And on top of it all, we're transitioning with AI, and the early studies, but the most recent one came out in November from Stanford. They found that 16% of entry-level jobs have disappeared because of AI. Okay, a lot of people out there say, "Oh, it'll never disappear." I think those people misunderstand the long-term effects of a technological change. On an ideological basis, is that oh yeah, over the next 50 years, it will create more jobs, but in the next 20 years, or all time frames that matter for us in terms of getting people on board and living your life, it will destroy jobs like a buzzsaw, and particularly in the entry level and junior slots. So in order to kind of avoid having, and you saw the thing I posted today is about 10% of young people have fallen off the job rolls. They don't even look for work anymore. So
civilizational suicidal ennui.
Yeah, no, I mean, you go out to the job market and you send out thousands of job applications, and none of them come back with any kind of positive response. And because those entry level jobs have been poached by visas or by offshore outsourcing, where people work virtually from countries around the world. And the current number of jobs being done inside the United States, at least where it's the focus of it is 3.5 million offshore outsourced jobs, virtually connected to U.S. companies. So yeah, we've created a buzzsaw that's chewing up young Americans, and it's going to make them, when you shave off for those actually who find work, at a less challenging and less lucrative career, you could lose a third to a half of their lifetime earnings potential.
And the whole family thing, as you
Right.
mentioned.
You won't be able to buy a house, or if you do, it's going to be smaller and delayed substantially. You won't be able to start a family. And we're doing that to hundreds of thousands of young Americans every single year now. And nobody will stop it. I mean, Trump won't stop it. Nobody will stop it. It's just
the space race stop it if there's a way for a meaningful amount of people to say, go leave home for 2 years, for 3 years. If you come back alive, you'll come back rich.
The thing is, with the space thing, I just was looking at it from a perspective of long-term viability of our humanity. And now that that's opened, I could see it playing out long-term, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But again, it's this, we're not, as things get more and more chaotic on Earth, the wheels are going to start coming off the bus. And this is one of them. It's a self-inflicted wound due to corruption, but nobody's championing, most of the big tech leaders, they're all like, they make tons of money, hiring visa workers to run their books, their accounting, or data analyst, or all the junior slots that they use to kind of staff up their companies. They save tons of money that way, and all these folks are beholden to them. They won't hire Americans.
Is the one dude who's championing the average tradesman or tradeswoman. I graduated college in 06. At the time, it was assumed that as a business graduate, just with a bachelor's, you'd be getting about 3 job offers. I got the first place that I asked for, so I didn't try to go find more. But I know someone who graduated the same time as me, but then she went ahead and got her master's in architecture. Graduated in '08 when no one was hiring new people. And then the job market showed back up around 2 years later for architecture master's degree people. But then she was competing with everyone who had graduated in the previous 2 years with a master's degree, and she
Right.
never got to work professionally ever.
Right.
And all this money spent to prepare. And for those particular 2 years in that particular degree, anyways, poof. And we're talking now about that being for a lot more people where you, like numbers you mentioned at the start of this call about percentage of STEM students who can't find employment. Something
It's
is
the,
going to change. Let's hope that the space race is enough pressure release valve that people can dream again, and some people will choose the dream over the nightmare. Uh, History
yeah.
does not smile well when you tell all your young men, "No, you don't get to work. No, you don't get to have a family." That not bad things happen historically when that's true.
Yeah. I mean, think of it more like we had two different development paths. One internally, navel gazing, spiral down, optimization, endless problems. The other one is external, outward bound, dreaming big, kind of expanding out into the wider external environment. And until just now, that external expansion thing was closed off. It could have gone straight toward the spiraling down at any moment. And until this thing is built and under its own sail, we're at least on that path. It's not going to solve all the problems in the short term. It's not going to solve it in the medium term, but it will be the solution long term. And we're at least on that path that gets us into that zone. But yeah, no, we're as a nation, you know, we're screwing ourselves over. I mean, you have to, until the end of the Cold War, we prioritized American citizens over everyone else. Because there was a reason for it. You had to have a good, well-educated, prosperous citizenry to be able to fight a Cold War and defend against incursions from socialism and everything else. That went out the window at the end, and we globalized, and now these CEOs don't see any difference between anyone around the world, and they don't prioritize Americans. I mean, I'm not talking be a brutal prioritization. It's just that if you see widespread unemployment among American graduates of universities or American workers who are trying to enter the workforce, stop. Okay, your policies are going in the wrong direction. Fix it, cut back, reform it, get rid of opt. Make it focus only on the high end talent. 10, 20,000 a year versus hundreds of thousands or millions, and fix it. Make sure everyone's prosperous. And this is particularly now that the AI is coming in. Right? As AI starts eating up these jobs, if Americans aren't buffered from this, if they're getting cut by all these visa programs and as well as AI, man, it's going to be the internal cohesion of the U.S. will evaporate. It's bad already. We're already politically fractious and fragmented. People don't, think about the nation as a whole anymore. It's becoming more and more a low trust society. When you see some other American say something on X or any other social media, you don't trust what they say anymore. You think it's a political attack or some kind of psyop that's being run against you. And the same thing in the offline world. I mean, that's a sign that the cohesion is gone or about to go completely out the window. And you got to reverse that if we don't want to be, in a hell of a hurting situation there.
That brings me to my information fealty thread. Did you read that thing on Twitter
Yeah,
yesterday?
no, you were on a roll. You're in a new space here.
It's
Going on, really kind of pushing it out, saying, I think it's really kind of who do you give, uh, whose orientation or what group of people who have a similar orientation to you do you give your fealty to. And if they're like, big names, it's more of a fealty thing. It's a if it's compatriots, more of a brotherhood thing, but they share an orientation.
And
And
they need
I
both.
found, and you found that the groups that actually adhere or come together the best are people that based on their background, they went through a similar experience to you.
Yeah, there's some reason you believe them. My grandfather.
In this environment, yeah, and it's because of the low trust, low cohesion kind of
Yeah,
environment we're in. People gravitate to those, and they can understand where that person is coming from, and they know it's not an attack. They're
yeah,
willing to because discuss it, and if you do say something that's a little aggressive, they kind of you know
yeah.
go
It's a
with it.
good
And
figure it out.
they don't like point the fingers at you. You're dead. I
Yeah.
can't deal with you.
My
You know,
grandfather was a World War II pilot. My other grandfather fixed planes in World War II. Therefore, John Robb, the pilot, is probably believable-ish. That thread, folks, is at Redbeard Brian on Twitter. And the way to join John Robb's community is on Substack for the cost of less than a pizza, less than a McDonald's meal, actually, at this point, tragically. So
like a McDonald's sandwich at this point. Not
pretty
even you don't
much.
even have to get fries
So
and anything else. Yeah.
you should enter into information fealty with John Robb because all the cool kids are there. I gotta go hop off for another call. But John, a delight as always speaking with you. This is also that URL, folks, is where you get this latest report, the race to space, at which we really barely even dug into a lot of the details there. But every month, once or twice or three times, you'll get John's take on something. Then you can share it with your friends and look smart. There's 535 people listening to this call live right now,
Oh,
and
hi,
uh,
folks.
yeah, our record was 1,700 2 days after Charlie Kirk was killed. But other than that, this is the biggest conversation we've had. So a lot of people are wondering about what's happening with space. And now you all have a better language to talk about what's happening and the relationship of the space race, not just being a cool tech thing, but as it relates to national culture, group cohesion, and information war, which is the kind of analysis you get from John Robb's reports, is you get to think about these things in context, not just the shiny bits of the individual thing. So go ahead, johnrobb.substack.com, join us there because it's fun. And Matthew, nice. I don't know what they are now. Nothing, not once in a while, but it could be.
McDonald's sandwich a month. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like
Okay.
$5. It's not
Great to see
killer.
you all. We'll see you next
See you,
time.
man. All right. Take care.